Well, right now on the program, Nutrien Ag Solutions' commitment to innovation and sustainability remains unwavering, and we're here to show how their technology can bring growers the next step in sustainable nitrogen management. For the first time ever, they're excited to introduce new innovation called N-FINITY, a biologically based nitrogen use efficiency solution. It's a first of its kind offering available for the 2025 growing season. Here to tell us more about N-FINITY, Ron Calhoun with Nutrien Ag Solutions and Loveland Products. Ron, it is great to connect with you. Thanks for joining us. How are you?
Good, Jesse. I really appreciate the opportunity to visit with you today.
Well, can you start by just giving us an overview of what N-FINITY is, Ron?
Yeah, certainly. N-FINITY at its core is a biologically based nitrogen management solution. And so when we talk about that, we're trying to partner sort of like with the nitrogen cycle that's happening naturally, the ways that nitrogen is stored out in that system, and kind of leverage the power of Mother Nature to try to supplement what you might be doing from a nitrogen management or nitrogen program on your crop. So in N-FINITY, we get three modes of action. We're applying, there's different ways that we think about affecting that nitrogen cycle. So we're applying a live isolate that can actually, it's a nitrogen fixer to try to fix nitrogen from the atmosphere. So if you think about maybe 79% of that atmosphere being nitrogen, in our soil pore space, in the air of that soil pore space, there's also nitrogen there. So trying to fix that nitrogen to make it plant available. And then we're also using nitrogen or these nitrogen isolates through what we call a signal response mechanism, where they'll actually exude chemistry that lets other nitrogen fixers know that there's activity going on and it's time for them to wake up and get going. And so we'll call that part recruitment, right? So we're doing direct fixing, we're doing recruitment. And then the third thing is looking at those complex organic pools of nitrogen in the soil and how can we help liberate some nitrogen from those soil organic pools. And so we kind of think about all of these ways that nitrogen is managed in and out of that nitrogen cycle from, other than, say, applying our nitrogen in a fertilizer program. And this kind of supplement or come alongside that to do direct fixing, recruitment of more nitrogen fixers, and then liberating those organic pools of nitrogen. So in that gives us another tool where we can sort of manage that total nitrogen input for our crop.
Well, what are some of the benefits that growers can expect from using N-FINITY? Let's talk about some of those. I know a lot of growers would be curious to know about all the different benefits that they can get from using this new product.
Yeah, so when I think about ways that I could use this product, one thing would be if we're going to have a product that comes to market, biologicals, you'll hear a lot of folks talking about that. Certainly, it's something that we've been involved with pretty heavily for the last couple decades, and other ways, even going back 30 or 40 years. And some of the limitations to biologicals would be trying to do like special handling and that sort of thing to make sure that they're surviving and applying in enough of a concentration to sort of naturalize and be able to have an effect at working. So we set a pretty high bar for the components of N-FINITY to be able to, survive in that jug, survive in storage. And then one of the things that I think is going to be really beneficial, Jesse, is the ability to tank mix N-FINITY with your existing in-furrow at-plant nutrition. And so we're not looking for kind of a special handling or a separate application or something where you have to go through some sort of heroic effort to make sure that we think that by providing it in a formulation that's going to allow you to put it into your already existing practices is going to make that a lot easier to do. And so that would be a particular benefit for ease of use. And then also, when we look back here 20, 30 years, we were using a lot more nitrogen per bushel of production than we are today. So growers have already been doing lots of great things, whether it's the way the hybrids can take up nutrients, whether it's the way that we're applying things in a more kind of surgical or banded way, all those efforts that have gone into getting more out of our system and improving that nitrogen per bushel. And so we feel like N-FINITY is that next tool that growers can use to help drive that nutrient use efficiency or that nitrogen use efficiency even more.
And I have to think too, just on the benefits as well, that ROI back to the grower, that overall cost savings. I know a lot of them are looking for. That's another key piece here as well, I would think, right, Ron?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we can drive down your cost of production on that, right, so that you're applying or using less nitrogen to produce every bushel, there's a situation where we can help to make that acre of land more profitable for the grower.
What sets Infinity apart from other nitrogen efficiency products that are currently on the market, Ron? Talk about that.
Yeah, so with Infinity, we're focusing a lot on those three modes of action. So the fact that we're not just looking at this enhancement or the supplementation from a single aspect, but we're looking at that direct fixing, recruiting of those folks that already live there, and then the liberation of those organic pools. So the three modes of action to try to provide greater success over a greater range of conditions that you're going to actually see out in the field. And then the ability for that ease of use to be able to tank mix Infinity into your existing, for instance, your in furrow at starter, to be able to put that down maybe with Y drops as side dress. So trying to make that ease of use and that kind of robust performance profile with the three modes of action.
And I have to think too that with all those modes of action, looking at different field and soil conditions, this is a product that could be used across a wide geography, right, Ron?
Yeah, so we have examples where we're talking to dairy farmers who feel somewhat maybe limited in the amount of nitrogen that they can apply and want to liberate more of that nitrogen that's in their system. We have folks that are already maybe adopters of other sorts of technology and have been driving that nitrogen use efficiency over time. This would be a great product to sort of layer in like that. And then also, I think, Jesse, for folks that are looking to start that journey, like what is something I can do to start maybe decreasing from 1.2 down to 1.1 down to 1. This is something that we might look at in their situation to kind of layer in as a first step with them on this nitrogen use efficiency journey.
Well, Ron, as we're talking about biologicals, maybe tell me a little bit about how this is different than some of our traditional inputs. We've heard a lot of talk about biologicals in the
Mhm.
last several years, and I think a fair amount of producers and even a lot of folks throughout the industry are still learning about biologicals. So maybe tell us a little bit just how it's different than some of our, traditional inputs.
That's pretty insightful, Jesse. Biologicals for the most part are not something that I learned about in school. Probably not something that a lot of people had formally in school. Those legs of the stool. We think about fertility, and we think about pest control, and we think about some, physical cultivation, mechanical management, that sort of thing. Maybe you add into their hybrids, but this biological management or biologically kind of coming alongside what's happening. I would say anecdotally, we've known about a lot of these things for generations, and the hard part is trying to find something that works well in a petri dish, that can get scaled up to the greenhouse, that can be scaled up to commercial, and has that same sort of effectiveness. I also think that there can be a little bit of shyness with something that's brand new like this, but boy, as you mentioned, when you look at all the different companies and the amount of investments that going into this biological space, I believe that those innovations of the last 40 years, the next 40 years, many of those are going to be based in this biological space. So I think it's totally worth it to put in the effort to become more comfortable, to know what sorts of questions you want to be asking, to sort of understand how biologicals are different, right? So I can have biologicals; those are going to be influenced by the system's ability to support that. And so, and you could have some variation in how that's going to perform with biologicals that might not be there with something where 4 ounces kills bug kind of thing, of more of a traditional input. So I would say whether this is new to you, that understanding kind of biology, taking the mystique off of that. When we think a lot about how biologicals work and they start talking about biochemistry, all our eyes roll back in our head. But really, all we're talking about is chemistry created by something living, biochemistry. It's very easy. And so it's the chemistry from what these living organisms do that actually cause all of the action out in that environment. So whether that's something where we're trying to trigger a response inside the plant, whether it's something that we're triggering a response on the plant, whether it's something where we're trying to work in the soil and trigger response in that rhizosphere. These sorts of solutions, I think, are going to become more and more common going into the future. And now we have the tools to be able to measure that. So in the past, where I could anecdotally tell you a story about this, now we actually have like the DNA and lab tools to be able to go out and verify that the thing we applied is now naturalized, and we can measure that either in the soil or in the roots, so that we can confirm some of these processes and give us even more confidence in some of these solutions that we'd be bringing forward as we go into the future.
And I think, to piggyback on that, Ron, from the producer perspective, if you really boil it down, not being afraid to ask those questions that you mentioned, not being afraid to try something new, because at the end of the day, we're all trying to achieve the same goal: grow a healthy crop, grow a bigger crop each and every year, right, Ron?
Yep. How do we know that this is working? How did you measure this? Can you show me how you measured this? Hey, is this going to work equally well in all seasons? Is this going to work equally well on all of my soils? Or, so trying to find those situations where you have the greatest likelihood for success is going to serve you really well. So I think it should always be a conversation. It shouldn't be something where you're being told. And just to be willing to ask those questions. Again, sometimes we have a little bit of shyness about things when it's new, and we don't want to appear like we're the only one in the room that doesn't know. I can tell you right now, everybody's the only one in the room, right? Because this is a new area, and should be something that we're excited to learn more about it as we have more and more successes in this biological space.
Ron, let's talk about when N-FINITY will be available for purchase. I mentioned at the top that it's going to be available for the 2025 planting season. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. So our Nutrien Ag Solutions stores are already able to bring this product in, and it will be available for the for at plant timing here as things are already rolling, and certainly available for 2025. So we're excited to be able to offer this product. We have a history in this space. Our first sort of true biological product was a product called Prologue that was introduced back in 2018. And that was using a live isolate for looking at phosphorus digestion. And that was one of the first cases we had where we were able to create a formulation that was real stable in storage, through travel, through the warehousing to the farm, and then be able to measure the activity of that isolate out in the field. And so, over the last 4 or 5 years, kind of taking what we learned there and then applying that into coming up with a solution for nitrogen management it's been a fun ride.
Well, let's talk about, if growers want more information, I'm sure, again, reaching out to their local Nutrien Ag Solutions crop consultant, going online is probably another way. Talk about how folks can get more information, Ron.
Yeah, so I think your best conversation is always going to be with your Nutrien Ag Solutions crop consultant. When we think about adding in biologicals and how that works, and trying to identify which of your fields or which of your crops where we think we might see the most benefit for you, that one-on-one conversation with your crop consultant, it's hard to replace that. Folks were looking to do a little bit on their own to try to find out a little bit more information, particularly as you want to dig in to understand how these 3 modes of action work to liberate nitrogen, to recruit additional nitrogen fixers, or the direct nitrogen fixing that's happening from the isolate we're applying. You could go to lovelandproducts.com/nitrogen naturally. And we have a landing page there that has some other resources where you could look at and read through some information.
Ron, great information on the new N-FINITY product. Anything else final you'd want to add or reiterate to folks about the product?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, the compatibility, I think, is a big deal. Being able to fit this into your existing farming practices is going to make this product easy to use for you. And then also just whether you're looking to improve your nitrogen efficiency in the situation you're already in, whether you're on that journey and looking for that next thing to fit in there. We might have folks that are looking to go from, like I said, maybe 1.1 down to 1 unit of nitrogen per bushel. I think that those 3 modes of action are going to help give growers the opportunity to manage that nitrogen component of their crop system with an additional tool that they didn't have before.
Well, again, lovelandproducts.com/nitrogen naturally, or you can go to your local Nutrien Ag Solutions crop consultant, for more information on N-FINITY. Ron Calhoun, appreciate a few minutes of your time here today telling us more about N-FINITY. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Jesse. Appreciate the opportunity.